I am Captain Logan, and this is day 267 of Spawn Year. Covenant has been rendered aimless, directionless, and completely hollowed out by Steve Niles. He's having a massive identity crisis, just like Al Simmons. Is he a man? Is he a monster? Is he really anything now? This story was published right around issue 100, so we're still a good couple years before Nix and Al's bizarre rehumanization, so it's unfair to complain that this situation is too similar to that one. But considering Brian Haldwin started this book, and it's likely he read Steve Niles' contributions, it seems likely that this development influenced Spawn's story. And both irradiate this frustrating aura of desperation to come up with some fresh new take on a played out idea that never lived up to its full potential to begin with. The sad thing is, while Niles is trying to chart new territory with Covenant by taking away his powers and pitting him up against plenty of deadly adversaries, situations where he's in legitimate danger, he's become so much like Al that it's not fresh or new. It's more the same brooding and whining and woe is me nonsense. This isn't Covenant anymore at all. So even though he's put in real peril and goes through terrible, bloody hardships, I'm having an impossible time caring. Haldwin progressed this character in a natural way. Whenever he made mistakes, I understood why and I sympathized with him. Now his whole life is spiraled out of control because he chose to go back to his home. Off panel, and I have no idea why. In this issue, Covenant decides he'll inevitably have to go get his necroplasm back from the druid that took it from him. I guess because his buddies at Ryle tried to crucify him, and being a man who looks like an ugly Jack Skellington is really hard. I could believe he'd come to the conclusion that he needs to embrace his existence as a hellspawn for some reason, and he can't do that without the necroplasm, but Covenant's motivations aren't well thought out. He seems to just jump to the next activity he hasn't tried yet just because he hasn't tried it. Covenant decides to procrastinate like a middle schooler the night before a history final and go off on an ill-advised adventure before willingly handing himself back over to Bulgy, and he meets a guy who's lost half his face and had his life stolen from him by a friend who kidnapped his wife and forced her into prostitution. Seeing this man as a kindred spirit, but more I think because he's just stalling for time, Covenant takes Two-Face's horse, kills the tavern owner, Bakert, who enslaved Two-Face's wife and tries to set her free, only to be ambushed by Bakert's thugs in another fight he can't win without his powers. You know, I appreciate a protagonist with limitations. The worse the odds, the more we cheer our hero on when he overcomes adversity, as long as we believe he really achieved something. But Covenant's a big warrior with lots of experience, and he refused to use his powers through most of his career as a hellspawn. He ought to be able to take a few guys smaller than him in a bar brawl. He's also not screaming in agony whenever they merely touch him, and that thing from a couple issues ago has still not been explained. I do like seeing Covenant helping another wayward and broken soul, and I don't know why this book can't simply be a series of those sorts of adventures, maybe punctuated by the occasional mythology story, dealing with Hell trying to force Covenant out of his heroism, but he keeps finding ways to use his new life for good. Yeah, I know, that's too optimistic and uplifting for a Spawn comic. So instead, we have to take this undisputably heroic but often misguided warrior and have him kill a guy more because he likes killing, implied by the narration, than because he wants to save an innocent woman. So now Covenant just is Al Simmons. He finds ways to justify violence, but he's really just thirsting for carnage. Fantastic. At the end, the never-ending overwritten narration spells out the lesson Covenant is supposed to learn here. He's too brash and impulsive, and there are consequences to these actions. This book was already about consequences, and they used to come about organically and through really tough moral quagmires. Covenant wouldn't act like this unless driven to madness, and the attitude in the narrative suggests this is just his nature. Meanwhile, Vikings just happen to attack Rael just after Covenant leaves, no doubt so he won't have anywhere to go back to after he's fully spawnified again. I think Niles keeps opening doors for Covenant and then realizing if Covenant walks through them, he'll be content and happy in one place for too long and he can't tell any story there. If Covenant knew his subjects forgave him, he'd go home like he tried to, but we can't have that or we'd be right back where we started, so something needs to happen to them. I know! Vikings! But we know there's an actual butcher skulking around the forest there, so Covenant's got to eventually face whatever that is and return to Rael once more. I don't think this was a loose end that needed tied up, especially in such a hackneyed way. Before this arc, this was the one Spawn book I could say I was consistently pretty happy with. I don't want to read about an Al Simmons version of Covenant. I have all the Al Simmons I can stand already. Signed, Captain Logan.